Okay, thanks for that. What I'm going to do, and Thomas and I talked about this, we're probably out of order, really, in terms of him providing the lessons, and I'm providing you with the base information that drove some of those lessons. Last season, rather than this season, was quite challenging because the central North Island went through a significant drought. And so we had, and you saw some results yesterday from some of the work that we did with Spring Sheep in conjunction with their PGP program, looking at feeding systems. And when you go into a drought, you learn all sorts of things if you've never been in one, especially with a new livestock class. So, because it's all quite new to us, there's a whole heap of theory out there, and there's a whole heap of really good research that's been done, but often it's about the practice of putting it in place that's actually quite critical. And as Manuel said when he was talking about farm systems in Spain from the north to the south, there are all sorts of different systems that get used, and one of the reasons is because you end up with different environments that you're trying to put those systems into. And New Zealand has as many different environments as you would like to choose. We range from subtropical to full continental systems. So we have all sorts of challenges like drought, low summer pasture quality, facial eczema, and many others. So how do we put those things together when we're unfamiliar with them? And again, a lot of our Manuel said really quite clearly, dairy sheep are not dairy cows and they're not dairy goats. They are different. They have their own unique properties. So how do we deal with that? So just as to point out a little bit about the differences in New Zealand systems. There's a set of data that was collected back in the early 2000s of pasture that was offered to growing lambs throughout the year in 4 regions around New Zealand. So this is the best pasture that was available on those farms at the time. Thank you. And the interesting thing is that feed quality is hugely variable. And again, Thomas really pointed that out to us when he said when we went to cut and carry, we had to test all the time to understand what we had. Otherwise, your milk yield goes up and down quite dramatically. And so as you can see there, Southland has the best profile in terms of feed quality. And the reason they have the best profile in terms of feed quality is because they have really cool summers. And I mean that in the kindest way. In all of the other places, we have quite hot summers. And unless you have irrigation, and irrigation actually helps the plant cool itself down and maintain feed quality, unless you have irrigation, you are going to have significant challenges with summer feed quality. So with that as a background, let's start thinking about some of the reasons why and where Spring Sheep got some of their lessons from. So again, we talked about this trial setup yesterday. This is a reflection of the mid-lactation part of that. Again, 100% TMR or indoors. Well, TMR is probably a loose term at this point in time. We've now figured out really what TMR really means. And then a hybrid system where they went outdoors overnight on Lucerne. And so let's just have a think about what the figures are. The animals were around about 70 kilos when they started. By the time we ended that trial, they're about 75 kilos. So there's plenty of energy in the diet for growth and plenty of energy in the diet for maintenance. Not a problem with that. They started off in good condition and they went to better condition. Right, so not a problem with that. Interestingly enough, even though they both had the same live weight gain, the same condition score gain, they produced different amounts of milk. Right, so plenty of energy in there for maintenance and gain, not the right energy in there for lactation. And that's kind of crucial to this whole thing. The intake, relatively similar, not hugely different. The real difference there is the bottom line is the energy concentration of the diet in total, right? And again, this is part of the test approach that Thomas was talking about. So that significant difference there in terms of their diet quality doesn't look like much because the ME scale is relatively broad. But the point is the working part of the ME scale is only about 4 units, from about 9 to 12, 9 to 13. It's actually a small part. So small increments in that mean a lot of difference in terms of lactational output. That is really crucial to this. And again, Thomas was talking about testing everything, making sure you knew what your inventory was to make sure you get the best out of that. So let's think about where that diet came from. And so they're the proportions in the diet, and the significant proportion difference, you'll note, and where the low quality came from was actually what we would consider to be reasonably high quality feed. And as Thomas said, some of the reflections you get when you're putting a TMR in front of them, if you make them clean up, you make them eat the wrong stuff. So that number there, and the fact that it was 46% of the diet, was what dragged the whole diet quality down. So silage quality is absolutely crucial in dairy sheep systems if you are trying to use silage. Absolutely crucial. And you can change that by using different combinations of pastures, but the biggest way to change it is making sure the contractor knows what he's trying to harvest. That's the real key to this process. So just having a think about how some of that worked. And this again is a reflection for you on the importance, not necessarily of transition, because you can see the transition period here. It's actually the importance of what was going into the diet. So when you're transitioning from quite a high grazing percentage of their diet here onto lucerne silage that's not so flash, you get a drop-off. The interesting thing here, these are the ones that are grazed outdoors. This is around about where the drought really kicked in, around about the 10th of January. And all of a sudden, again, there's not the feed in front of them to be able to compensate. Again, just thinking about if we want long-term, high-performing sheep, we need to make sure that we mitigate all of those things. And that's why Thomas and his team in the Central North Island in particular have gone down the track of producing or investigating these kind of hybrid systems where you can try and extract the best of both worlds. But again, you need to understand the resource that you have. Really, really important. So same sort of lessons as Thomas has already pointed out. Know what your feed quality is and make sure you keep it high. Balance the diet to make sure that you produce the right stuff for lactation, not for gain and not for maintenance. They are different. And then making sure that silage quality is maximised is a real key piece of this puzzle, and it is extremely important, and it's actually quite hard to do in a lot of our farming systems. We rely so much on contractors, and when they turn up, it's actually going to be a real challenge. And I would suggest that you check the cost of the feed, because sometimes silage is not as cheap as you think it is, especially if the quality's down. Then it's not cheap at all. It's an extremely expensive option. So sometimes some of the other options might be much better for your sheep than trying to rely on silage. So again, just big thanks to Spring Sheep. One of the great things that I really enjoy about this industry, and it's as what Thomas said when he was up here as well, we share this stuff, warts and all. There are opportunities in here that if somebody makes a mistake, at least we can talk about it and we can learn from it. And that's really important to us as an industry going forward. We need to make sure that we are open and honest about what we do. So again, thanks to Spring Sheep for the opportunity, and thanks for listening. Cheers.